Welcome to episode 764 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am Dan Hilton, and I am joined today, as I am every few months, for one of everybody's favorite shows, and that is the La Masia update. And it is mid-season, so it's not the one where we go over a million billion names and tell you who to get excited for and things like that, but it's more of that mid-season update to see if some of the names that we were excited about have bear fruit, to see if there are any new names to talk about, and of course there are, and I need help, as I usually do, to do such a task, and that is the help that I get from La Masia expert in ArsenKveFCB. We're talking all about La Masia again, and Arsen, per usual, thank you so much for helping me out.
And as always, thanks for having me and inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, so over the summer, I think we actually had a bigger task where we covered 54 names that I thought that you needed to know in La Masia, from the U13s all the way to the first team. And now halfway through the season, we're going to revisit some of those names, as I said, somehow hit some new ones. There is somehow always new young players popping up who have first team potential. And then I think it's also a good time to answer some of the big, tough questions around the academy to see which of the young players have gotten the opportunities and which ones haven't. And where we begin is, of course, with Barça Atlétic, with Julian Belletti's side, who I believe at that time of recording are fifth in the fourth division. So they're on the path to promotion. That might not happen. And the reason why I say it might not happen is because that is a team that has been riddled with injuries. And not just to some of the players that are there for Barça Atlétic, we'll say, the ones with less first team potential and more there to help with promotion. But no, even the ones who are there with potential first team potential, there are injuries to Landy Fode, Alexis Almedo, Xavi Aspar, Semen Namoko, Ibrahim Diarra, Victor Barbera, and Oscar Gustau. All of those are currently still injured or will be injured for the remainder of the season, like Semen Namoko. And then there are others who've been injured at different parts of the season, like Guille Fernandez, who missed part of the season as well. So that's a huge bit of names. I mean, I'm disappointed by so many of them. Namoko and his ACL injury might be the most disappointing of the bunch, because when I list that entire batch of names to you, I feel like Namoko is the one who, we thought he'd be kind of with the U19s, and then he surprised in preseason with Barça Atlétic, and then he really hit the ground running and was one of their best players. But of all those different names, I mean, it just feels like, as is the case with a lot of young players, when they get hurt, it could really affect their development, which is the real big bummer.
Yeah, definitely, and it's kind of feel bad for Juliano Belletti. He already lost his trusted trident in the attack of Hugo Alba, Jan Virgile, and Arno Prados, as none of them are in Barça Atlétic. So he went into Barça Atlétic job. We're doing very well with Victor Barbera picking up some form. Then Oscar Gustau, after returning from injury, also looked getting better and better, scoring in the youth league. And then, of course, Semen Namoko was very impressive, being the best player, in my opinion, as well. And now it's just the entire front line is constantly changing. But I would say Juliano Belletti is still doing a very decent job. Of course, they're in the fifth position, but they still have a game in play in hand, to play, as the game against Valencia B was postponed last weekend due to the weather there. So yeah, personally, looking at the situation, the results could be better, of course, but it's still there. But if you look at the context that despite all the injuries, the team scoring the most goals in the group, it's kind of outstanding. They have 31 goals in 15 games. So that's actually incredible numbers considering the context,
Yeah, I said a lot of those names are ones that I would have expected that we'd be talking about here. Diarra was, after a promising arrival last season, we thought that he would be able to build on that. When you talk about the lack of striker options in the academy, Oscar Gustau, of course, is the first name on everybody's lips. And again, Namoko when it comes to another right wing option. And then even in the first team with injuries potentially to Koundé sometimes, that you would love to see one of those right back options like a Landy Fode, like a Xavi Spar. And again, that's not happening either. So hopefully, and then Namoko's out till next season, but hopefully the rest of the guys I named can get healthy in the second half of the season and not necessarily help the first team, but get back to it with Barça Atlétic. And then maybe for the preseason next season, we see the likes, a bunch of these names as well trying to impress. Now, speaking of players with first team potential, two guys who also happen to be related, of course, in Toni and Guille Fernandez, who are healthy Toni's been healthy, but Guille was injured and is now healthy again and back with Barça Atlétic. But for those two, I think the idea, having seen them in the preseason with the first team, they went on the tour. So you thought that they would be incorporated in the first team a little bit more, I think, than they even have been. Those two not really getting opportunity. So I know that you think that these two have sky-high potential, and I agree with you. They're still, it's so interesting because they're still just 17. And you hear all this noise like, oh, they need to go on loan in January, or they need to do this, so they have to consider their first team potential, whatever. And then again, I remind everybody, they're still 17 years old. Like, can we wait a second? Can we calm down? But if you were advising those two, would you suggest maybe they go on loan to January? I guess the more positive way of asking that question is, do you think the fourth division is a little bit too low of a level for them in their development right now?
I'll answer you with a question. What is the best for the team and what is the best for the player, So if you're looking at the team, I would say it's better to keep them both and actually let them play out the season. And then when they turn 18, actually renew their contracts, as their contracts are actually ending in 2027. So if you're sending them on loan in January until June, so you still have to adapt to the team. So if you get loaned to FC Andorra, where Aron Yakashvili, another loanee who's doing very well, you still have to adapt. You're coming mid-season, so they're already going at it. Being established in fighting to stay. I think, of course, in the divisions, Segunda A. But in my opinion, the loan could be very beneficial for them. We see very positive signs from Ander Estraga, Enake Peña, Hector Ford, who are doing a good job doing the loans. But again, it depends on what is the actual project for the youngsters. Their contracts are ending in 2027. So if you loan out them in January, what's going to happen in June? So do you renew them again and send them a loan again? And what is the purpose of that loan actually? So that is my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, they unfortunately for them, they play in quite crowded spots on the field. Again, Toni Fernandez, all of his minutes have been absorbed by Rooney Bardghji in that same role. And then for Guille Fernandez, I mean, Gabi's been injured, and it is a very crowded position in the midfield right there. Now, a player that could have some more opportunities with Gerard Martins moved to left center back at the moment. Now, 47 minutes in the Liga over 3 appearances, and the Copa del Rey start for 63 minutes against Guadalajara for Jofre Torrents. 663 minutes and 9 appearances with Barça Atlétic. So we have seen when they both play for Barça Atlétic, when they play at home, Jofre Torrents heads over with them, even when he can sit on the first team bench on an additional day. He does turn 19 at the end of January. Again, still a teenager for a whole another year. But what do you make of Jofre Torrents' season so far? I feel like I expected him to have a few more minutes with the first team than he's had, but yet I haven't, as I said against Guadalajara, he hasn't done anything wrong in the minutes I've seen him with the first team, but I don't think he's had performances in the first team either that has had me saying we need to see more of him with the first team right now. It's not like he hasn't blown me off the page, but I have said, this is definitely still a kid with a lot of potential for the future. It's not like he's looked completely out of sorts with the first team either.
Yeah. With Jofre, I would say his season so far has been underwhelming, both in terms of minutes for the first team, but also looking at his performance for Barça Atlétic. As compared to what was happening last season with him, he was outstanding almost in every game, and cannot be said the same during this season so far. But I would say his match in Copa del Rey was one of his best so far this season. Of course, was solid there and there. But yeah, honestly, with Christensen's being injured, I expect Gerard Martin to be, playing more and more as centre back, and most likely we'll see Jofre more as a left back and being called up actually quite often. I think that will be the case, especially if we're not going to sign a centre back for the first team. So hopefully the confidence will get there. As in the interview he said that when he actually played during Copa del Rey, he looked more confident. And it seemed like that after he mentioned that as well.
Well, for Dro Fernandez, he's 17. So and Dro's been incorporated as well. He's kind of been, when we talk about the attackers from the academy, he's the one that kind of won the spot, won that role on the bench, and he's not really featuring in Barça Athletic. He is playing and win with the first team. So what have you made of Dro Fernandez in his appearances? I think we've seen a little bit of a pushback from some other of the experts saying, well, maybe he doesn't have the highest ceiling, but I don't know about that. Again, the kid is 17, making first team appearances, and when he gets on the ball, you could see that there's something really special there.
Yeah, definitely, and I think Hansi likes his ability on the ball the most. Of course, as physically he still has a room to grow, but on the ball, the way he manipulates it looks like it's glued to his feet. So that was what fascinated me the most about him during his youth stage. But regarding his performances, you have to consider the fact that not everyone is Lamine or Pau Barsi. So those performances, of course, coming from the bench, playing 10, 15 minutes, not always you can show your best. But the most important is getting that confidence, getting those minutes, and actually playing professional football. And I think with time, he will get better.
Well, guy that's on the bench but has yet to make his first team debut is Tommy Marques, the defensive midfielder. So, of what we saw with him in the academy, what do you think Hansi Flick is seeing for him? And again, he's not made his debut yet, but he is getting appearances on Flick's bench right now. Is he a guy that in the long run you think has first team potential?
Hard to say. He would say, I would say he is a more typical Barcelona pivot. Of course, with his story, personally, I didn't expect him to be in the first team. As usually when players go on loan during La Masia years, most of the time they do not come back completely. So, and Tommy returned from his loan to CFDM due to injuries at under 18s team. So talking about Tommy's qualities, of course the ball control, his reading of the game, intelligence, and of course kind of similar gameplay that you can see of Busquets, also sometimes in Frankie de Jong, the way he carries the ball. So yeah, but of course, in my opinion, he still needs to improve his area abilities, as he has that physique to be able to fight in the air, but during his youth stage, he lacks that a bit. And of course, he also has a great ability to shoot from range. So, and I think that is, I think he could also improve. As we saw him scoring a few long shots during his under 19 stage. So, like looking at it, like positioning, dribbling, balance, that is the qualities I think Hansi saw in him that could, I would say, something different to Mark or different to Eric Garcia that could actually benefit him. But again, it's hard to see him entering or for the minutes or making the debut, especially with Eric Garcia doing very well and Frankie de Jong coming back, and then Pedro will come back as well. So until maybe in January he will make his debut. You never know. So yeah.
Well, let's stick with the first team for just one more moment here. One of the questions that I've been pondering And this has to do with, I think, the negativity. And of course, you're going to hear people say, well, why doesn't Hansi Flick trust La Masia? Why is he not trusting youngsters in these other opportunities, including, again, the Copa del Rey, where we really just saw Jofre Torrents be like the one kid who doesn't get regular minutes, getting minutes in the Copa del Rey against Guadalajara, which is a third division side. But it's so interesting, that question, because between Lamine Yamal, Pau Barsi, Marc Bernal, Rooney Bardaji, again, who was signed for Barça Athletic and the first team, that's 4 kids under the age of 19 who are getting major minutes. And then you look at the minutes that Gerard Martin now in his second year with the first team. He is still 24. I mean, does he count? He's 24 years old and he's improving. Eric Garcia, he's 25 and getting better. Again, not necessarily a pure, when he was at the academy, and now he's, then went to Man City at 17 and he's back. But again, he's improving. And if we consider any player U24 as still improving and not yet in their peak, who needs time to improve, again, that's Eric Garcia, Pedri, Balde, Juan Garcia, Gerard Martin, Fermin Lopez, Marc Casado, and Gavi when he returns. So all of those players are still U24. Again, not to mention Lamine Yamal, Kubarsi, Marc Bernal, and Rooney Bardaji, who are all also still teenagers. So it is interesting because when we say, does Hansi Flick trust La Masia? Well, obviously he does, because there's so many young kids. And I'm not trying to answer this question for you, but I think you and I are probably on the same page that, yes, I would love to see more Jofre Torrents and Joe Fernandez. I would love to see Toni and Guille Fernandez. I would love to see a bunch of the names in the next year or two that we're about to get to lower on the list coming through next summer as well. But the truth of the matter is, this squad it's really young. It's still a really, really young squad. And it's not that, if you're good enough, it doesn't matter how young you are, you play. If you're good enough, you play. And that's why Kubarsi and Lamine Yamal are on the team sheet game in and game out, because Hansi Flick completely trusts those players. And now he's taking the time and allowing Marc Bernal to get healthy and find his way back and slowly integrate him with more minutes. But, would we say Hansi Flick trusts La Masia? I think it's going to be hard to answer that question this season. We might have to wait till next season or the summertime to see, if those players get more minutes. But I guess I'll rephrase the question and ask you, are you happy with the amount of time that some of the La Masia players have been getting with the first team? Or do you think there could be more minutes that Hansi Flick could be giving to some of the players we talked about?
Well, if you look at this season, I would say maybe there could be more options for someone like Alvaro Cortés to enter the team, especially when you need that center back to be available. And on the weekend, we didn't have a single center back as a backup, option. So maybe Alvaro Cortés, who seems to be completely forgotten by Hansi Flick, but maybe it's something that Hansi saw during training, that he was not able to understand what he wants from his center backs, or something completely different, But regarding the situation, I would say Hansi had trusted youngsters, especially in his first season. And this kind of introduction can be compared to Xavi's also second full season, when he barely introduced any youngsters, that we can see something similar to Hansi Flick's this time around as well. Xavi was introducing youngsters left, right, and center during his first and a half full season, and then the second season, those youngsters kind of disappeared from the dynamics. Marques was also not trusted. Kind of similar to what the fans are asking for Alvaro Cortés also to be introduced to the first team, especially needing left center back, while we struggled at the pivot position during Xavi's time. So that kind of situation, when the coaches kind of move away a bit of giving that a lot of minutes to the youngsters, kind of can be seen with Xavi and Hansi Flick, but both of them, I would say, still trust the youngsters, giving their debuts, still playing them, as in his Hansi Flick still trusted Sergi Dominguez, Andres Cuenca, and many, many more. Just because of the 5 months when maybe the pressure got to him or something, you never know. As the fans, we don't know the behind the scenes stuff. So, but yeah.
Well, let's now head down into the academy. Again, we're going back to Barça Athletic, but we'll be jumping between the U19s, Barça Athletic, and things like that. One of the names that I think that is a name because of his father and Patrick Kluivert's son and Shane Kluivert, also brother of Justin Kluivert. He has popped up now to Barça Athletic, and with all the injuries I mentioned to Barça Athletic and Julian Belletti's side, he's also gotten a leading role in the UEFA Youth League. And the 18-year-old left winger is not to say a kid that I thought would be an afterthought, but you just, when it comes to the legacy kids, you never know how good they're going to be. But as far as the players that I've been pleasantly surprised with in the first half of the season in the academy, Shane Kluivert, I think, is almost first on that list because he is one of the ones that I feel like is taking up the opportunity of the additional necessity for minutes that Belletti has with all those injuries to the other players.
Yeah, with Shane Kluivert, interesting story that it seems that he shows up when you do not expect him to show up. He can have a poor game, and then in the youth, like what happened in the youth league, he just scored the winner against PSG, if I'm not mistaken, and then also for Barça Atlétic or in the youth league as well, like scored 2 goals or something and won the game and made a comeback for the team. I think it was against Frankfurt. So yeah, with Shane, like his qualities are hard to describe because sometimes he's good at dribbling but can struggle against more physical, bigger and faster defenders, but with Shane, like the guy is hardworking player. I would say he maybe puts the most work in training, but the talent-wise, I would say he's like maybe not the most talented player, but he tries to compensate it with the hard work that he's putting on off the pitch, like doing trainings and so on. So if he makes it, it's not primarily because of his talent, but because he's a hardworking kid.
Yeah, which again, with the legacy name, sometimes is the opposite. You think that he's going to have that special sauce that his dad had. And in truth, though, Patrick Kluivert was also just a hard-nosed, hardworking forward. And when we talk about the forwards in Barcelona history, he is one of the ones that I consider more industrial, not necessarily the ones that it's just, the ball's on his feet and the special thing is happening. Now, speaking of the left wing, Dani Rodriguez, he was dealing with a shoulder injury over the summertime, and fitness has been something that has not always been in his camp. But now that he's nearing 20, not to say what happened to Dani Rodriguez, but we haven't really seen him around the first team dynamic. And are you a little bit concerned that maybe that ship has sailed for him?
I think possible, but I still trust Dani. But against Fruni is not getting minutes in the first team as often as we can expect. I don't see Dani also entering the first team dynamics, and Rooney was there almost as a replacement for Dani's injury. So, of course, Dani looks back to his best. Of course, that required someone to be out and actually Dani to be playing more. As he had a fantastic performance in the Barça Athletics comeback against Atletico Baleares. Of course, the quality is there, talent is there, but the chances are going away slowly, So, and it seems that Hansi Flick kind of also moved away from Dani and also looked into draw more as that kind of player who could play as a winger as well.
Yeah, another player that we don't really talk about anymore in Barcelona. Well, I wouldn't say we ever really talked about him, but Brian Fariñas, who is a kind of I would say do everything kind of midfielder. I've seen him in the academy. Of course, he played as a 10 in younger divisions, but he is now kind of playing more as an 8. And he's also played 6 with Barça Athletic whenever he's needed to. Again, kind of a do everything midfielder. And it's always weird to me. This is really a question more about him than it is about, the macro sense that he's a player that has moved up slowly, level by level with through the academy. But he's one of those guys that you don't ever really see him in first team training. So you always think, well, it seems like there's something that's good enough for the club to keep him around and not say, hey, go somewhere else or you're never going to make it here. But he also doesn't seem to have that first team potential to ever get to training. And I don't know. It's an interesting case where he is that a prime example of a player that's just going to work his way up through the academy, and then eventually at 21 years old from Barça Atlétic or something, or however old he gets, then he'll wind up leaving. But yeah, is there, when you're watching these academy kids, is there those examples that you're seeing too, where it's like, yeah, I see that kid, he's important to the team he's playing in the academy, but it's hard to see that he's going to have first team potential?
Yeah, definitely. I would say could be the same thing could have been described about Marques. The guy looked as a fantastic player during his juvenile B, juvenile A, but never stood out as like the best player or like the best midfielder in the team. But he was always there providing the security, and the same thing can be talked about Brian. Can play as a 10, as a 8, also played as a pivot for juvenile A under Juliano Belletti. So it has that versatility to play everywhere in the midfield. Also has those qualities, to control that midfield, to withstand the pressure from the opposition, while also providing that link between the defense and the attack. So in Barça Atlétic, he is also important seen by Juliano Belletti. That's why he starts every game. So. But regarding his first team opportunities, of course, it's kind of difficult with already stacked team. But you never know how things turn out in the future.
Yeah, well, speaking of turning out in the future, we're seeing a bunch of players linked with Barcelona. And when I say young players, I'm talking about 15, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. And the name to know that people don't really aren't familiar with is João Amaral, who is getting a lot more responsibility he's the head of scouting, and with his scouting ability, some of the names we've seen linked in the last few weeks, Hamza Abdelkarim, who is the Egyptian striker who was at the U17 World Cup. Again, that is kind of the name that we're expecting that's either going to be done or that's going to be a rejection, right? Like one of those two, that we're nearing the place where that is either going to be over the line very soon, I think in January, or it's not, with a loan to buy for him. We've seen the Manchester United, he can't come till he's 18, but in JJ Gabriel, those rumors, I think that was also to help him get a new contract at Manchester United, but he's a huge talent. We saw him linked. Club Brugge, they have Jesse Basuo, who was also linked recently, and then a Norwich winger in AJ Tavares, another kind of, not say unknown name, but somebody who played with the England youth team. So a bunch of those different names being linked to the club before. And I always find it funny when I see the stories come out that, the idea or the philosophy of scouting for La Masia is changing, and now they're going after all these young internationals to bring in and see what they could do here. And then, this 2 years, 3 years on from when Noah Darvic was incorporated, and you saw Eamon Cospo incorporated, and Andrea Natali. So, not to throw cold water on it, but the idea that Barcelona is just now trying to scout around the rest of Europe to bring in these talents is a little bit rich to me, because again, they've been doing that or trying to take advantage of those opportunities. But when it comes to João Amaral and the names that you see linked or the names that he's brought in, do you see a general through line or philosophy or the type of player that he's looking to potentially bring in? Again, none of the four names that I even mentioned are currently signed to La Masia, or with the exception of Abdelkarim. The other ones, again, those are just rumors, or they're just links.
Yeah, but I would say that out of all the four names you have mentioned, I would say AJ Tavares would be the closest to be joining La Masia, at least at this stage in the negotiations, of course. But I had the time to check out Hamza. I would say he's a target man, more of a striker, during his AFCON moments, the matches that I saw. Very good in there, but of course with the ball, he needs a lot of work. So it's a bit completely different to what we have seen at La Masia, when we see that more technical and more with the ball creative strikers that we have seen in La Masia developed, even like false nines. So he's a bit different. So maybe that's what Amaral is looking for, something different to what we already have at home, So that is exactly what Hamza is. Looking at other names like Gustavo, I would say this one is a bit more difficult signing to get, as his club is already looking for a great project in the first team at Club Brugge, as he's a massive talent. I would say maybe even the biggest talent in the four names that you mentioned. So yeah, and interestingly, as mentioned, AJ Tavares also is a winger. I'm not sure he's as technical as we see in La Masia players, and of course with JJ Gabriel also big talent. But I would say this one is also difficult, as Manchester United are trying their best to keep the player. And based on my sources that I talked inside Barcelona, they were very pessimistic about actually getting him, despite the rumors that were trying. So yeah, but it's actually good to see that despite our financial situation, that of course a lot of signings that were planned in La Masia did not happen last summer. But hopefully a few signings, the top talented players in Europe could be signed for Barça Atlétic or Juvenil A. Of course, domestically, we're still going for names, and can mention about a signing that will be in Juvenil A and Barça Atlétic, a midfielder from Terrassa FC. Of course, for the moment, I'm not going to reveal the name. But yeah, he's already training with the team, and I would say maybe he will be registered in January if his trial goes to plan.
Well, there have been some new names that's a great transition, because there are some new names that we, again, after 50 plus names that we talked about over the summer, that you can't hit everybody. So some of the new arrivals over the summertime have taken on more responsibility in the UEFA Youth League. So now we're going to head down to the U19s and the U18s for a little bit here. Some of the U19 names that we didn't even get to, like Hafiz Gariba, I think that's the big one. He's a left-footed center back, 18 years old, with the U19s, arrived from Marseille in February of 2025, so last February, originally from Ghana. But when Barcelona are, desperately, I think, looking for a left-footed center back, he is he's 18 years old, so there's certainly, when he's alone on an island, some issues that are still happening. But he does obviously, to me, look quite a bit like the center back that we sent to not to Rennes, to Lille. Oh, the name is escaping me at the moment. Yeah, Mikel Faya. Yeah. Mikel Faya. Yes. So I think there are a few comparisons there, though. I think Gariba is he stands a little bit taller, whereas for Faya, I think he's a little more we'll say A to B with his running, where Gariba, I think, is still has to figure out, how his athletic position looks. And then you also talking about other new names in Nuyu Fofana, who just got his Barça Athletic debut over the weekend. He's a U19, 17-year-old right winger and center forward. Paul Bernabeu, a left back for the U19s. Pau Cifuentes, a left winger with the U19s. Oriol Payas, the left winger of the U19s, another 18-year-old. You have a U18-year-old in Sergi Mayans, who we didn't really talk about. He's not a new arrival, but he's kind of been the 16-year-old playing with the U18s, center back, kind of jumping out. I also already profiled for one of the La Masia profiles in Xavi Menangels, a attacking midfielder, U18s, 16-year-old, and then another 16-year-old U18s is left winger EU Martinez, who again is not new to the academy, but another one of those big names. So of the names I just gave you, just spare us a moment for Hafiz Gariba. I think, again, he's the big name to talk about. But then outside of him, what are some of those other new names that have stood out to you in these first few months of the season?
Yeah, with Hafiz Gariba actually just arrived in January, so almost 1 year he is at La Masia, and the progress he made is actually outstanding. Defensively very solid, good in the air, good at tackling, interception, reading the attackers, but also great with the ball. But sometimes I would say he is too adventurous with his passing, and that can lead to problems. This gives out the opponents a chance to score more opportunities. So I think that is one of the things that he needs to improve, and of course a bit of concentration. Uh, as sometimes he loses that concentration, and again that could lead to mistakes. Especially we saw that in the youth league in a few games. But despite that, he looks very good. If I'm not mistaken, he is also two-footed. If I'm not even mistaken, as I've seen a lot of matches from last season that he played as a right centre back and used his right foot quite often. So very interesting centre back, and I would say a player to keep an eye on. Regarding others, also Yuri Payas have been also decent enough. Of course, not on the same level as Jan Virgile that also arrived at 18 to Juvenil A, but also is doing great, being important for Paul Planas. Also, I don't think you have mentioned a name that also arrived with Xavi Mirangels is Byron Mendoza. Also looked a very interesting right winger that is difficult to defend against. He's a very tricky dribbler, very creative, and kind of reminds me of Angel Di Maria. So it's very, very unusual to compare a Spanish player to Di Maria, but that's what kind of play you can see in him. Of course, you have other quality players like Sergi Mayans, also left-footed centre back that also impressed in the Club World Cup together with EU Martinez, and both are doing very well, and hopefully they will continue their development in the future, as they are two one of the most important players in the under 19s, 18s.
Yeah, so as said, there's always new names to be, and I'll of course have that in the show notes or the description. All the names that we discuss will be, you can find those names again because my Spanish is okay, but my Catalan pronunciations are always left in the comments, or I get some positive and negative feedback on those. Now, the other names to update. It's always really tough when you and I have this conversation because I said when we're talking about a lot of these players, the first question everybody asks is always first team potential. What's their first team potential? Could they make it? And so what I've done now is I've compiled a list of, I think, the first names that anybody who cares about the academy are kind of talking about. And we're going again all the way from the U13s all the way to U19s with this list of names for give potential updates. The only new one that I'm adding, or I guess the only two that I don't think we discussed before, was Gerard Muyo, who is playing with the U18. He's a defensive midfielder. And then Lucas Bernal, who is a 14-year-old left back playing with the U15s. And that is no relation to Marc Bernal. I always have to be careful about that. Yes, Lucas Bernal, the left back, is not related to Marc Bernal. That is not an older brother, younger brother situation at all. They're just as a common Catalan last name. That is what that is. So those are the two new names to throw at you here. But yeah, I'm going to give you the list here with the names to update as far as, we'll say, first team potential kids. And I just, again, because of the age of these kids from U13 all the way to U19, we don't really need to. It's only been a few months. Like, for example, I'll give you one of the last names, and David Moreno, who is seen, he's a 13-year-old center midfielder who's seen as one of the biggest prospects in the academy. But due to literally growing, like growth spurt, a growth spurt, he has only featured for what? It's been 3 weeks since he's been back. So he did not really feature at all in the fall because, again, he's a 13-year-old who was growing and dealing with some growth pains. And so he might be an entirely new player now than he was when we talked about him over the summertime being this, this gigantic prospect that he was. Same thing with Fode Diallo, who's getting appearances. But again, he's 13 years old. He was setting records at the U13 or the U12 level. And so when you watch these kids' progressions, so much can change when it comes to that age from week to week. I'm not talking season to season. I'm talking week to week. Things change for those kind of players. So yeah, when it comes to U13-year-olds, I would say just relax. That's more the age where we can do it from year to year or from double season to double season. But the other names I'm going to throw at you that, again, I not say give me a thumbs up or not necessarily a thumbs down. Obviously, we're not going to do that for teenagers, but the ones that are kind of on that path in Ebrima Tunkara, the U19-year-old, or sorry, the 15-year-old for the U19s, Baba Kourouma, who plays for the U19, 16-year-old center back. A name that we kind of threw at you over the summer in Pedro Villar, who is really kind of breaking out, a 16-year-old defensive midfielder, U19s, center midfielder in 17-year-old Pedro Rodriguez with the U19s. And then the third guy in that midfield is Orion Gordon, the U19, 16-year-old center midfielder. Then we go, I guess let's stop there. So there's the U19s in Tunkara, Kourouma, Villar, Rodriguez, and Gordon. So of those 5 names, it feels like they're all on the right path, but has your mind changed at all about any of them in terms of their high potential, or is one impressing you, or is there one that, we're kind of missing from that list of first team potential guys of the U19s?
That is a tough question, especially with the list that you just mentioned, the 5 names, as all of them are top talents. All of them are having a fantastic season, of course.
Which is good.
Maybe Kourouma, you could be Baba. Maybe you could put Baba a bit below them, but otherwise, Ebrima coming back from an injury, picking up a goal over the weekend, a fantastic one as well. So Pedro Villar also, I'm very happy for his comeback. It seems like he's rejuvenated, as he was also struggling with the injuries. Also, he came from the same small town of where Joe came from as well. And Pedro Rodriguez also seemed like very important, and actually now enjoying his minutes, being very important for Paul Planas, as previous seasons he struggled. And of course, Orion Guren, more of a newbie in those teams, but also having a fantastic impact in the teams that he's playing for under Paul Planas last season, this season, and of course making the jump, and what they're doing and their performances are absolutely fantastic. So I would definitely say they're the top talents in La Masia at the moment.
Okay, so yeah, I think I got my list right with the U19s. Maybe we'll see, again, some of those kids, probably not next summer, but again, maybe even the year after. And Tunkara, probably the biggest prospect of the bunch that we keep kind of mentioning again, but he's still just 15 years old. Then we head down to the U18s with Gorka Buil, U18-year-old, 15-year-old attacking midfielder, can play on the right wing. I said Gerard Muyol, who's also playing the U18s. Alayu Dermeye, which is a 16-year-old, can play on either wing. Again, U18s. We're talking the U18s, and he's also 16 years old. Ismail Ziani, who just renewed his contract in this past week, 15-year-old striker playing with the U18s. Not really one of the ones that we talked about as a big prospect, but do you feel like, I think we'll stop the U18s there. So there's 4 names for you for the U18s, but I'll start there with Ziani. We didn't really talk about him over the summertime or last year as, a top prospect in the academy, but again, he's 15, playing with the U18s, just renewed. Do you think he is in that Oscar Gustavo category just yet, or do you think as a striker prospect he still has to show you a little bit more to get to that level?
With Isma, it's hard to say because he's not playing at the moment and has not played a single game, if I'm not mistaken, this season at all. So
right.
It's hard to say how he's progressing at that under 18 level, as making that jump from under 16s and under 18s could look like not a massive deal, but actually at academy level it is a deal, a massive one. And usually those who performed at under 15, under 16s could drop out and do nothing, or at under 18, 19. So this level is already like the players who are preparing to enter the professional football, So it's hard to say about him, but what we saw during his last seasons, he was an outstanding striker. But again, it all depends on his behavior, on his ability, and of course, and we'll see how things will turn out in the second half of the season, especially if he will play at all.
Yeah, so let's talk to the U16s real quick. They were at the Messi Cup last week, where they had kind of mixed results, and some of the big names there, Ruslan Mba, 15-year-old, can play on either wing, usually plays on the left wing, though, U16. again, player. You've got Hugo Garces. You've got Artem Ryback. So there is some talent there with the U16s at the Messi Cup. Were you a bit disappointed with what you saw from them?
Maybe a bit, but the tournament itself is a very difficult one, as you have the top clubs in there. Man City and River Plate, both two fantastic academies, and they came up in the same group. So of course, finishing third just on goal difference was a massive hit on my feelings. Especially wanted to see how playing against other teams will turn out. But besides that, performances were decent enough, I would say. Of course, could be better defensively. But yeah, Artyom Rybak, Ruslan Ba were the outstanding performers in the tournament for Barcelona. Of course, Ahmed Tabarkani also had a few good looks, and I think he kind of impressed the left back, Ahmed Tabarkani. So definitely those three are like my best players in the tournament.
Yeah, and then finally, just going down, if you could give quick updates on, again, Lucas Bernal, the left back, David Moreno. Well, I already kind of updated everybody on David Moreno, and then Fode Diallo. Those are kind of, again, the U15 to U13, the big names that people want to know. And then if there's any at that level you want to throw out there, again, I roll my eyes because you're talking 5 years away from the first team. So everybody relax on any names that you might give at this point.
Yeah, with Lucas definitely looks like top left back talent, as you just mentioned. I would also like to mention a few other players like Hector Nestor, who is having a fantastic season, like having 11 goals and 7 assists in 10 or so matches. So definitely a key player for under 15s. And of course, we had a few new signings. From Espanyol, Mingu Kli, that I liked a lot as well as a right back. So definitely the two players alongside Lucas Bernal to keep an eye on. While talking about David Moreno and Fode Diallo started slowly this season, but continues to progress. Of course, not scoring as crazily as he did last season, but still doing a good enough job, I would say. And of course, David Moreno just returned in November from kidney injury and had an impressive impact on the team, picking up like 2 goals, 4 assists in 4 games. And while the under 14s, the teams that he's playing for struggled before that, and now they're actually back to the top positions, fighting there. But besides that, also in the team, another name that I would like to put out, just maybe in 3 years we will come back to that name, is Antonio Amaya. That had actually the one name that actually impressed me the most, especially the amount of progress he made. He grew quite a bit, looks fantastic as a midfielder, can play as a winger as well. So maybe in 2 years we could name him as a big talent. So yeah.
Exactly, right. In 2 years, we could potentially talk about him with the U16s. Right, exactly. It's a big talent. So that it tells me that I think we've wrapped it up. Where I think that is the best place to stop is what we're talking about. In 2 years, we'll talk about them in 3 years. So yeah, that's I think a good way to stop. So Arsen, you were fantastic as usual with these updates. Again, as a reminder, the names that we mentioned, that they will be down in the show notes or the description, whether you're watching or you're listening. And then again, I would expect that we will redo this list again come the summertime and see who has continued to make some progress. Unfortunately, maybe some of the ones that have stalled. But a big reminder, as I always say before Arsen leaves us, is that just because a kid had a few rough months or got injured, you never know, right? Like you have players that even arrive at 17, right? Like when we talk about Carlos Pujols or the Sergio Busquets or Pedro, the original Pedro, but Pedro Rodriguez. So, you have players coming in at 17 years old who were unheralded, who have just completely popped, but then the first team manager likes them and now they're in the first team, right? Joe Fernandez just arrived 2 seasons ago, and not say it was more, let's say an unheralded a rival, but he comes from Galicia, again, a U17 prospect that all of a sudden now here he is incorporated in the first team. Not say almost overnight, but just a mercurial rise for him, where he was playing at his regular levels or his regular age group, and now all of a sudden he's on the first team bench consistently week in and week out. So a lot changes from month to month, from year to year, and that is why, again, we cover these players. And what I will say is, don't ever count any of the kids out. The majority, as we always say, what is it? If you get one or two around the first team every season, it's great. And even this season, we're seeing it's Jofre Torrents, it's Joe Fernandez. And so that's nothing that Toni or Guille have done wrong, but they're 17 years old, and you can only jam so many 17-year-old kids in the first team dynamics. That's the nature of the game. That's the nature of the beast. So again, I always want to tell people, be positive about all these kids, because hey, if they're able to play professional football at any level, at any point in their lives, then La Masia has been an utter success. And I know, Arsen, you agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. You have to be patient also as a fan, and not to be overcritical over a 16, 17, even 18
right.
or 19-year-old players just because of 2 games, 3 games that they performed not up to a fan standards, So not everyone can be perfect, and not everyone can be Lamine Yamal or Pau Cubarsí, Those two are just out of this world talents, one in a 1,000 players, because just to reach La Liga's level, you have to be one in 100,000 of kids, So, and having 2 at the same time is absolutely crazy. And maybe fans do not understand it for now. But yeah, of course, be patient with the youngsters, because sometimes they can be late boomers as well. So.
Yeah, it's not normal. That's what I'll say. Lamine Yamal, Pau Cubarsí, even Marc Bernal, it's not normal to be that good and not prepared for first team football at that age. It's not normal. But I hope it is normal for everybody who is listening or watching to subscribe to the YouTube channel, give a good like on the podcast apps, follow Arsen if you're not already, everywhere on Instagram, on Twitter. I don't understand how you have not even the time, but just the wherewithal to go through. And you're also doing these awesome watch alongs for Barça Athletic games that have been really great. So all the content you've been putting out there has been really terrific, Arsen.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words.
All right. So for everybody else, I will likely see you again. Maybe I won't. We'll see. If I don't, Happy New Year. But again, for those who are, depending on when you're watching this and depending on when it came out, it probably came out after the Christmas holiday. But either way, again, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, or if anything else that you celebrate over these holidays, again, including Happy New Year. I will definitely be seeing you soon. That's why, you subscribe, help me out on Patreon, merch store, all that good stuff. And I appreciate everybody so much. So again, peace and love for the holidays. For Sebastian.